why we are here 10 years later, and the injustice is being felt, and yet I don't think we have quite the traction that we should have had at this point in terms of achieving justice. There's certainly a level of financial freedom that we've achieved. That's excellent. That's awesome. But it seems as if the injustices are mounting, and that's okay. That's good for us, frankly, because we capture people who have this level of angst and we bring them here into the space. And unfortunately, there's a couple things that happen at that point that don't seem to really build the team. Well, all of us, really. Is anyone a comedian here? Is anyone a comedian? Are there any comedians in the audience here? Maybe. Okay, good. I want to talk about comedians. We have Mike in space. But he didn't raise his hand. He didn't present anyone. I don't know. I'm going to talk about comedians if they're not here. My theory on what a comedian does generally is to heckle. I think a comedian is a professional heckler, and there's this sort of like combinatorial effect right now online where the hecklers are out en masse, the amateur hecklers are out en masse. And they show up on Twitter and they scream out about the injustices that they're receiving. People agree, they have these giant mountains of injustice. It could be anything from environmental stuff to big corporations to obviously financial control of our money. And these echo chambers are kind of building that. And that's really good for us in this space because this should be our bread and butter. But the problem, increasingly, is that we aren't taking the hecklers and forming them into a more actionable herd. And I think that these are inherent problems with the online world, which we'll get into here in a little bit. So what I'm doing now, I think, is unfortunately, very unfortunately, making a case for what I think is going to be some level of a need for organization. Yes, that's right, we'll get into that. That probably necessitates some need for professionalism at some level here in this space. It's not a place I wanted to see myself in, but when we are finding ourselves in a room full of men who are looking to align on like causes, it seems that all of the literature does point to this word and this idea of professionalism, which we are going to discuss today. It seems like all of these hecklers, these amateur hecklers that are online, they don't have a Schelling point of professionalism in any way, shape, or form, and I think that that's why we have so many unresolved and chaotic forms here 10 years later. So I scoured the internet looking for some Schelling point of professionalism that we could all agree on, something that I think is a good starting point, if nothing else, if we're re-examining first principles, and if I'm trying something new out, so I'm going to present to you what I feel is some measure of professionalism, wrestling professionalism here today, guys. And let's see what I have underneath here. This is as awkward for me as it is for you, I promise. And hockey professionally is very good as possible.
How many pictures are we going to take home like this?
I don't know, as many as you want. You take pictures with the professional you can. You've never seen one before. This is what a Bitcoin professional looks like. Best I can do. So yeah, social media is kind of screwing us up, and I think what we have done a very good job of to Bitcoin's benefit, or to crypto's benefit, is fostering this online environment of heckling. I think that in older times we weren't allowed to broadcast a lot of our complaints, our grievances, align others in these roles, and in many ways the anarchy that we've asked for is very much here, is alive and well. The disorder, the chaos, what we might consider to be anarchy. I see that on Twitter right now. We have a lot of people who all agree that there are no leaders, whether or not there are. Very arguable, very arguable. We'll discuss that here in a second. But I think that, my hypothesis is that this state of anarchy that we came for, the utopia of anarchy, this is it. This is where we've arrived. We are now in this state of more or less online global anarchy. Lots of people are here. The blockchain movement is big, the crypto movement is big, and certainly this notion of online anarchy is ginormous. Unfortunately, having reached that utopia, my concern now is that it is scaled to the degree that it can. Historically, anarchy movements have been defined as a transitional movement. They've been defined as a response to tyranny in some capacity, and a detransitioning away from the power structure of the big. So we've done a lot of that. Here we are, and we have a lot of people aligned right now, online, in this goal of something along the lines of decentralization. I mean, we see this everywhere, even on media, in ways that I don't think it's acknowledged for what it is. We see reports on television about the corporations that are starving out workers who are kind of not thinking of the little men. We probably a little guilty of sitting back on our laurels in so much as having recruit wealth as a result of this movement. But I think now, with the lull in the price, with the new entrants, we can start marching again towards actually accomplishing some of the goals that we've all set out to achieve. However, I think the unfortunate truth is, in order to do any kind of goals, the organization probably requires that we step away from online media to a significant degree. I'm not saying we can close our accounts or do anything like that, but I think we need to start deep transitioning from the online world as a measure of coordination or activity. It's a fine place to talk and bounce ideas off, but we need to bring a little more sweat equity into the space. It seems to me that Twitter is very much the anarchist street. You show up, hecklers are everywhere, everyone heckles everybody, there's no professional heckler in charge, and so it's a little hard to lead anything in any direction. Here, you may notice I am probably a professional heckler, and I'm leading us in some capacity, begrudgingly or otherwise, with my mankini on. Reddit is an affirmation chamber of sorts. I think it's a very positive end. But if you are a bear, you will hear only bear things on Bitcoin. If you are a bull, you will hear only bull things on Bitcoin. And it seems to satisfy a need for a lot of people. It's great. It makes people feel better. It's good at what it does. It doesn't necessarily accomplish very much, unfortunately. I don't know what Facebook is, honestly. It's this weird transparency engine. It's sort of George Orwell's nightmare come true. It is the sort of, I don't know, Chinese authoritarian state that we opt into of some kind. So I don't know that the Bitcoin treatise is alive and well there. It's a place where you kind of barrage your family members with weird ideas that you have. It doesn't seem to work for me, but you guys might. In any case, the progress that we have to look at, I think, on Bitcoin has been a little bit lower than what I would have liked to have seen for any number of people that are aligned by some ends towards justice. We haven't really done all that much in terms of action. But I think that they're a good starting point, and I think we will probably and should probably start focusing more on events like this. And I want to talk a little bit about, I think, how the events play into things and what problems they solve for us and how we can actually make more action happen. Not only in terms of visibility, not only in terms of growth for the movement, but in actually accomplishing goals. The business models of the search engines, of the social media companies, generally what they do is they take people who have any degree of following and they pit them against each other and they just annihilate each other's support and faith, and then they repeat the cycle and the cycle begins anew. Here online, that doesn't seem to happen. And I've been trying to find, when I survey people on the online world and the offline world, to see what the differences are in terms of people's behaviors and what they discuss. And it's really like this parallel world online that I'm seeing. And there's a lot of things that are just very decoupled from what I see in the field. And it's easy to blame Russian bots. It's easy to take these sort of tropes. I don't think they're entirely accurate. I think the personality types online that seem to be more sympathetic towards agitation may not be all that useful for anything more than agitation in the space. And it may be that our ideal strategy is to encourage them to do what they do online, but then have these sorts of things offline, where we actually do the real work for really setting up, I think, community tenets and goals and working on hard problems, which I'll get into. Online, it seems that on Bitcoin, the business plan, as it were, was to very much emulate the underpants gnomes business plan on our way to hyper-Bitcoinization. Wherein step one, we have the underpants. Step two, nothing is defined or said. In fact, you can't even talk about it. And then step three, we own the world. Well, 10 years in, I think it's time to start thinking about how we actually bridge that gap. I think that online, that conversation can't seem to happen. But I think offline, this is a place where we can have that conversation. So yeah, let's revisit in this room some first principles. I want to see, I don't really know, this is an experiment for me. Maybe I'll divide the room right now. If so, that's okay. let's do some quick polls. Let's take some contentious issues online and see how it maps offline. Okay, first off, who believes that Bitcoin has leaders? Okay, excellent. So we have here what seems to be at least 50% or so who believes that Bitcoin has leaders. Online, it seems like the amount of friction that you have for saying Bitcoin has leaders is inordinate. There's just no ROI on opting into a campaign for leadership online. Offline, here we have 50% of the room that says, yeah, there are leaders. And my suspicion is that even for some of the people here who say there are no leaders, well, perhaps, can I ask maybe of the people who said there are no leaders, how many of you run nodes?
I do.
Okay, so the people who say no leaders, there are in fact some that run nodes. The people who say that there are leaders, how many of you run nodes? Interesting. There doesn't seem to be a correlation there. So like one of the first things I would probably advocate doing is more polling in the blockchain space. And it would be nice if we had the ability to actually understand the demographics, as it were. One of the major issues we have online is effectively Sybil attacks. Those Sybil attacks are non-trivial problems. For those that don't know what a Sybil attack is, it's effectively an attack against a community or a protocol that is based off the inability to know how many human beings there are in the pool. So like online we have all these shill accounts or all these troll accounts or whatever, and those people can be voting multiple times even though they represent 0% of the interest in the group. That's much harder to facilitate offline. So offline we can get meaningful demographics done in an assembly like this, and we can see what's important to us. What injustices are there? I mean, just polling earlier, it seems like control of the money is one of the big ones. And online, there's clearly a gap between what is discussed and what people feel because of this inability to poll. So right off the bat there's been some immediate ROI on meeting and assembly online and doing things online with actual people. I think, too, in the online world, because we can't see faces, there isn't any body language, and we can't really gauge immediacy in any way, the neuroticism seems to grow. It seems like in a vacuum of appearances and imagery, people do assume the worst. There's some innate thing that happens there. So when I look at the no leaders thing, I think is probably the case is that there's a contingent of Bitcoiners who feel that if leaders were found, if leaders were seen, that the faith would be lost. And I don't think that's at all tenable. I understand how you might get to that position. But my suspicion is that it is actually untenable. And if you were with people, what you would see is what we actually have here is an alignment of values in a community that sees some degree of injustice that we can together tackle. And that kind of nullifies like the entirety of the no leaders thesis. Alternatively, if no leaders is very important, we could then, at some level, decide, okay, for the people who believe in no leaders, we will stick you here with your no leaders kind and see what you do. You are friends of us in the same venture. You want to get to the same places we want, and you can go there and we'll go here. And rather than fight, we'll just check in from time to time. You tell us what you learned, we'll tell you what we've learned, we'll see if we can help, and we can continue moving. And in this way, in the offline world, we don't have to worry so much of the attrition games that only causes us to attack ourselves from within. We've seen that with the multiple Bitcoins, wherein some percentage of the community found an injustice in the Bitcoin space and immediately pivoted to fighting what was the incumbency in Bitcoin. And that would be, namely, maybe depending on how you want to do the politics, either the Bitcoin SV or the Bitcoin Cash or the Bitcoin XT or the Bitcoin Core. These are groups that found tyranny in some capacity. And because there wasn't any form of IRL coordination, it seems like the incentive was just to form these attrition games on social media, where everybody's social capital is depleted until the net result is that we are all weaker than we started, even though we are very aligned in our goals. I think another, I think another reason to care about perhaps the role of leadership, it is my thesis that though Bitcoin has been marked by decentralization to a significant degree, I have not yet seen an innovation that aligns the incentives of humans or the interests of humans in a way that's particularly new outside the value transfer. So what it seems to have happened is people show up, they want to do the Bitcoin Braveheart thing, they want to accrue social capital, and so they carry the ideology to the nth degree. And in doing so, it kind of drowns out anybody who would be a centrist or any degree of reason, and it only encourages more and more extremism online. However, if we've always had leaders, then it would seem to me that what they've been doing has at least been moderately successful. I see that Satoshi Nakamoto led at some capacity, and there's any number of people who led after him, and it seems like at all of these points we were achieving. So we should really care to at least know at what point we decided to drop the leaders meme, and then measure the results in some capacity based off of that, if that's the way we see it. It seems that the business models online are really good at creating injustices, and we're seeing this in multiple ways in many, many other communities. In a lot of ways, this should have been our bread and butter. At 10 years in, we should have seen ourselves in more places. I remember, I think when the Ukrainian Civil War was starting, there was, for me, what was an iconic image of the freedom fighter who had a QR code donation thing that he was holding up. He seemed like he was downtrodden. He was this sort of oppressed person, the proletariat of sorts, and Bitcoin was his savior. And we really, I think, shined at that moment because we were offering a renewal, we were offering a redemption of sorts that allowed this person to ascend in the social hierarchy or in power. And I haven't seen that as much in more recent movements. And that's a little discouraging. And the reasons why are kind of obvious to me, and we'll get into that. It's very funny to me that for a lot of the people who I find saying that there are no leaders, the patterns are fairly similar. They all converge in this sort of emerging consensus way on whatever the Bitcoin celebrity is that they follow's newest tweets or podcasts are. And it very much reminds you of this adolescent type of era where all of a sudden all of the adolescents will do like the, Marilyn Monroe? Was it Marilyn Monroe, the goth guy? Yeah, this is sort of like counter-signaling thing that they all emerged on, that they're not, they're independent of a sort, they don't believe in following, and yet they all did the same exact thing. So I think if we be online, we can actually see a little bit more to what we're dealing with demographically. It may be that we find that some of these problems that we have in managing our goals come from certain pockets in demographics. And I don't know if they would be age-based, I don't know if they would be cryptocurrency-based, etc. We'll get into that and what to do about it. Currently, it seems that every time we find any incongruency in the demographic, we split, we fork, and we fork. And there's very little uniting incentive online. Seemingly offline, we had a few people leave. I don't know if I bored them, I don't care. But by and large, we're all together as a herd, and there seems to be an incentive offline to unite and to be present. It is why we're here. That is what we wanted to do, was to seek a greater social validation, acceptance, and position, and meet with like-minded goals. And I think we need to study what's going on demographically that is not reaching some of those people. And reach them. I really don't think we should kick some people out. I think what we have to do is meet them at their level. And we'll get into this here in a second. The revolution will not be televised. Like that is just the case. It's just very obvious. I've been working in the news cycle for a while, not as like an exemplary, like a member of the journalism elite, but even at my level, there's a few things that I've started to notice. And the tendency for the mainstream media to redefine events is very high. I think all of us have we've all been like socially conditioned to accept meaning from the press in various ways as it's delivered. This is the conflict, this is the good guy, this is the bad guy, and this is the op-ed version of what happened. But that is not the way the world works. The way the world works is there's friction, there's chaos, there are people on every side. You can try to get information, but there's a fog of war, and the good guy is non-existent, the bad guy's non-existent, there's just friction and chaos. And then over time, things settle, and we have maybe a better picture. But here in the space, because we're all in this online world, it seems like, even to ourselves, we're pushed to put people in boxes, put issues into a form of resolution when they shouldn't be, and frankly, to not resolve things when they should be. Here 10 years out, we're still like arguing all kinds of stuff that should have been resolved a long time ago. But for varying reasons, the pressures in the media aren't actually in our interests as Bitcoiners. They're in the interest of the advertisers or the social media companies. And it seems like we're really succumbing to the sort of oppression that I thought we were trying to flee in the first place with some of these things. In a very successful decentralized world, we would see ourselves being the arbiters of this assessment. We would be defining the history. we would be choosing the resolutions in a way that maximized, I think, all of our input and viewpoint, frankly. So yeah, the revolution just won't be televised. It's not even a conspiracy. It's just that at some level, it doesn't seem that that's what people want online in a lot of formats. I do think that scaling from here will probably require action. Okay, now this is not like a revolutionary cry. I'm not going to do any of the older things where burn the banks or anything silly like that. But I do think action is required. We do need to do a handful of things to show people that there's a movement, that it's alive well, that people are coordinating on like-minded goals, and that we have some degree of power. The price alone is a wonderful indicator, but as we've all seen, it can correct wildly and fast. And without some degree of action, without some degree of perception of growth, it would at some point affect the investor sentiment. I'm very bearish on a handful of trends. This hodling to the point of prayer. I don't know that that's reasonable. I think hodling is good ethic, but ultimately we have to actually do something at some point. The potential is clearly here, but I think we are not. I think the reason we're not actually succeeding more is because we kind of have relied on these centralization providers, the social media providers. So another thing that I have with the online world that is increasingly obvious to me, that regrettably so, knowledge is power. Everybody knows that. But I don't think what people realize is that the way that asymmetry in knowledge is delivered is where we achieve power. So like here in this room, I can say things to you that the rest of the herd doesn't know. That is, at some level, our power. And it's perverse because in the online world, you have to kind of share your secrets in order to gain followers and gain prestige. But what that does is it creates an externality cost onto the system, because this could have been our knowledge to empower our goals. But instead, you give it to not only our enemies, but our sort of poor gatekeepers in the community, who then pillage and take and who don't really give back as a result of this knowledge acquisition. So that kind of is antithetical to, I think, the social media space in terms of what we need, which is asymmetric knowledge, and then how we succeed in social media. And that's kind of a glaring problem. I think a lot of people are starting to notice that too. We're seeing at least the start of like paywalls. Having a New York Times subscription probably changes you as a person in society, because you now have information about the world that your fellow neighbors don't get. And I think that's going to become increasingly pronounced. And here in this space, sure, we can emulate that model, and that's not a bad thing to do, is to have like an insider press. But I think that there's even more potential meeting IRL. And so I'm pushing for that right now. Pushing for that. I think that that's our next step. Okay, so here we go. Let's do another set of questions here. Let's see what I can get from you guys. I'd like to know how everybody heard about crypto. Let's take some of the old timers. So someone who's been in crypto for like 3 years or more, raise your hand.
That's an old timer now?
I know a lot, yeah.
Not a good offset question.
Fine. Let's do this staggered. Who's been here for 5 years or more? Okay, perfect. Wait, what got you in here?
I heard about Bitcoin. Didn't really pay that much attention back in like 2011. I went to go buy a video card, and I couldn't figure out why ATI video cards had a 25-40% premium on NVIDIA video cards. And I figured out quickly it's usually to mine Bitcoin. I'm like, what the hell? So I was like, I need to take a second look at this technology. So that's kind of my short story about how I got it.
Do you remember like a specific, was it a couple things that hit you, or was it like one thing, boom, I'm in?
I read an article, I saw like the price action. I saw the mining farms that people had put together, and I thought to myself, people are putting serious resources into this, and it's not like some little thing that I saw at Slashdot once upon a time or some other place. So it seemed pretty serious, and well, it seemed very fringe, but it seemed like I had a feeling right away this is going somewhere, and I got to figure out like maybe there's something wrong with it, but if this actually works, and it's working, then it's worthwhile.
Okay, so another 5-year plus member, raise your hands. You, sir, on the ground. How did you find? Well, there's 2 people on the ground over here. The closest to me in the ground with the black cap on. Yeah, if you can yell a little bit. Do you have like an epoch of when you were alerted to Bitcoin, and what did you do from there?
I probably found out about it. I couldn't sleep. I was just trying to think about it. I was already thinking about decentralized money as like probably a young teenager. And then I just typed that into Google, and then eventually one day came across like talks to people like Gavin Andreessen, like he had a podcast called Let's Talk Bitcoin that's not active anymore, but he would interview people doing startups within the space. And then I was like, wow, there's a whole community for this. And then I saw that like Litecoin, and then I remember CoinMarketCap like being like 5 or 6 coins at the time. And like that's what got me, was like the community was just so there for like everything. Like the Reddit page like exploded like every single time there was a tiny little rally. And so I was like more into the decentralization of like I hated the like capitalism at first, so I was into like a lot of like socialism, and a lot of libertarians came to conferences. Like the first conferences I went to around like 2012. So that's probably what got me into it. It was like just the implementation of a community being decentralized.
Okay. Both of you are fairly similar in my mind to what I found in class 5 years plus ago. Let's take somebody really new. Do you have a question, or did you want to get surveyed?
I wanted to get surveyed.
Okay. How many years and how did you get in?
It's been a while, and I saw a great opportunity on eBay to resell cloud mining contracts.
Oh, there you go. Classic. Do you have anyone from anyone new to Bitcoin, blockchain, crypto in the last year? Is that person here? Don't be shy. I want to examine you. No? 2 years. Anyone in 2 years? Yeah, there's an old timer club. Oh, yeah, perfect. How did you find out about us?
I had some friends that had tried to get me to buy XRP in 2015, 2016.
And friends, were they IRL friends or are they offline friends? Or are they both?
Oh, it's
Combination.
They got me into it by showing me screenshots of the Blockfolio app, and I still wasn't sold. You know, they were just saying XRP. So I'm like, well, what is this? And I found out about blockchain, and from there I was kind of fascinated with blockchain. Both. I'm in for polling, but I'm also just fascinated in the possibilities of blockchain.
Okay, so in this room, it seems like, and this is news to me, I didn't expect this, but already quick polling has shown that a lot of us are old timers. Here's a new person. The old timers did find out online from this very limited and completely non-predictive sample, but this is the type of information we don't even know. So the old timers came from online, it seems like online exposure. The new person came from seemingly more IRL exposure. And there's like a disconnect, and I see this increasingly in the space, between some level of IRL and online participants. But not only that, we have these ingrained social networks that I think are like, I guess probably a result of like socio-political histories. So there's a lot of, I'm guessing, a lot of like libertarian sympathy in this room, which was very much our class if we were older people. But then amongst the new people, it doesn't seem like that is a value as much. You are some kind of like anti-capitalist or socialist sympathy, and that's okay. I think that rather than like engage in a battle to death with you, what I should do is find out what we have in common and then work together. But it seems as if online what ends up happening is we're further entrenching into these blinder spots where we only associate with our kind, and then there's no ability to grow with our like kind or like mind and figure out where the demarcations are. And frankly, like I'm watching the news right now, libertarianism isn't as healthy as it was when we got started. That just seems to be the case. I'm not happy about that. We can talk a long time about why that is. It doesn't mean that it's going to be the case forever. It may wax and wane. But even still, if it's waning right now, then we can ask ourselves what is waxing. And it does seem like there's this like new socialist, like anti-capitalist contingent out there that is seeing some kind of refuge in this technology. And like, okay, I don't know exactly what the right thing to do is about that, but it does seem as if we probably have more in common with crypto people than we do anything else. So we should be at least figuring out where these communities are growing, and rather than continually dividing ourselves and splitting Bitcoin into like, I guess, a socialist Bitcoin and a capitalist Bitcoin and any other kind of Bitcoin, we should instead figure out where the demarcation points are and associate in a way that is significantly more constructive. Polling helps us do that. And we only do that if we solve civil attack issues. And it's a theme I'm probably going to be referring to more and more here on this talk. The divide should be obvious even already. I'm trying to transition, I think, more to IRL now. There's a lot of people doing the online beat. I think everybody in my demographic that is like of some kind of 30-plus-year-old range has at least heard of me. And so they may hate me, they may love me, I don't care, but they at least see me. But like the new people that we need a younger representative in all likelihood, and that's fine, because I think IRL is a good place for us to, as we've kind of matured a bit, to start figuring things out, not only for ourselves, but also for the new people. And to reach out to them better, hear out what it is that they need, what it is they're doing, and what it is that they're succeeding. And capitalism, when it works well, at least as I was taught, is when people of very different kinds meet together and they put aside their differences and they exchange, wheat for cows or whatever, and they go on their merry way, and that's the interaction that they've had. Here online, it seems like the way that things are progressing, it's preventing trade. If you are a Bitcoin type A or a Bitcoin type B or a Bitcoin type C, I hate you, I want you to die, get out of here, and we're not doing business anymore. And that's just catastrophic for us. That's part of the reason why 10 years in, I think retail hasn't perhaps performed as well as it should have. And not that that's a bad thing even, but that seems to be the pattern. I think if we start looking around, okay, and we start saying, okay, so this sort of revolutionary spirit, this sort of hyper-Bitcoinization, this sort of decentralization that I think attracted us to a great potential here, where is it being manifested in the world today? Because this passion exists, and these examples are, they're going to be a little contentious. I see it in Venezuela, and I see it with the Yellow Jackets. And in prior times, when Bitcoin was better organized, there would be more Bitcoin representation at these events. And I don't want to promote violence, I don't want to promote any of these things, but I do like the idea of social organization, that there's a proud history of that in almost every nation in the developed world, where individuals unite for common goals. And we're finding that there's a dearth of that in the modern world, except for these places. And in these places, that's where Bitcoin should have taken off. But I don't see that having been done. So it seems to me that they know something that we don't. It seems that something happened IRL there, which we were not privy to, and that is to our detriment. If we had better feelers in the IRL world, we would know people within our circle or friends of friends who are close to the Yellow Bats, who would get into there and tell us, well, this is what we're seeing, this is what's happening, and then we can also promote our agendas with those people. Like, okay, well, let's maybe put some Bitcoin logos here, and let people know that if they need a refuge in the craziness, we can at least be some impartial source of value storage. Or if maybe there's like a credit card issue, and there's an above-board need for exchange of goods and services, but there's some degree of oppression, well, we offer that too, that kind of thing. And we haven't been successful there. And I think it's because a lot of us have been doing online-only endeavors and not getting into the offline world enough. So these aren't exactly the examples we should follow. We should be learning from these successes. And I then ask myself, okay, so then what do I see that is succeeding in the mainstream press as a response to what I think is most of our goals, the virtue that we came for, control of our money, empowerment of the individual, and freedom from oppressive authoritarianism in some capacity, maybe it could be said. And it seems like, okay, off the bat, displays of power. Displays of power, everybody likes it. And it doesn't have to be like onerous displays of power. Simple things like the kid who was holding up the Bitcoin sign behind the Federal Reserve Chairman as they were speaking. It was like, yeah, we got into your hometown, we got into your building, we got into your home, and we are here, and you can't even. Everybody loved that. Nobody was hurt, it was fun, it was benign, and it was covered in mainstream media at some level. These are the types of things that I like. I think that when we leave the silo, when we join the normies, and we place ourselves in these capacities, we can probably do a lot more for our own cause, for them, and for people as a whole, rather than when we assemble into either online silos or echo chambers or confidence chambers, what have you. I guess, who remembers flash mobs? Do you guys remember flash mobs? That was like a thing for a while. Yeah, I thought that was fun. I thought that was a lot of fun. I bet sure most of you thought that was fun. There's a degree of it that gets a bit absurd, and we are grown men, and maybe that's not the best use of our time in some cases. But that's the kind of stuff that makes the news. And these are the displays of coordination amongst people. They're uncanny, and they're strange, and they're spectacles. And it brings attention to some latent power that wasn't disclosed above board, or wasn't evident. There's a shock value to it. And these are the types of things that I think we could be doing more in this space. I can imagine, just off the top of my head, you guys can probably do much more, but like drones maybe with like LED signs or coordinated events where people wear maybe some outfits or something like that, and promote some level of spirit, some level of health and power in this underground movement. There's a degree of seduction in that as well that I find very compelling. I don't know if seduction will trend, but it seems like in all this transparency and loudness and broadcasting, we've lost this notion of seduction, and I could see that coming back. And for those of you who don't know, seduction is like when you see Alice in Wonderland. She has she goes into the sort of like that door there. It looks like kind of regular. There's a sign on it that says like, "Don't go in here," and you do, and you walk into the room, and then there's this magical event that happens. And it was unannounced, and it was compelling because of that. We were kind of missing that online, but I think that we can bring that to the offline world. I think we can bring a lot of interest with these types of things, and putting magic back into the air. The things have gotten so serious online. I'm not innocent in making things more serious, but the fun of the 90s with GeoCities and cats and strange things online, it seems to be waning as, frankly, as these social media companies are just engaging in these battles of passion and fervor. And it might be that the place to find that now is IRL. It might be that a lot of the mystery has left the online world. Maybe it will never return, or maybe it will return in 5 years, I don't know. But I'm pretty sure that offline opportunities offer us a great source of potential. I can imagine us doing things like renting out a room somewhere at a festival or an art thing and setting it up in some way that's just bizarre. We have a yellow card? Am I that? Say what? Holy cow, all right. Oh man. So many cards here. Okay, well, all right, so here's the thing. All right. Yeah, I quite literally could do a whole second talk on how we start to lead IRL and what to do IRL. But you guys all came here, IRL, and it seems to me we can and should form little committees, small groups, I think is perhaps one of the terms for this, where we have a like-minded kind in a metropolitan city, or in some level of university, ideally, or these types of things, where we decide what are our talents, what are we good at. In this world where programmers have a lot of power, it seems like the injustice is probably going to be growing from the people who are unspecialized in their labor. But that's not to say that they won't be of use to us, because I think our power has always been our numbers, and our numbers alone. I think 80% of anything that we need out of people is just having hands and being able to work with stuff. So it seems like if you're watching this, if you like this, if you're sympathetic, there's a couple of things we can do. We can start putting pressure on people online to start coming into things IRL, saying, look, what's your area? Come over to here. What's your area? Come over here. Are you a university student? Whatever. As we start to see that pressure from us in this room to people online, if that grows, we can then start forming channels in a fairly decentralized way between our small groups and start to form superordinate goals that we all have. Things like that we know from polling is what we want, controlling our money. These are tropes that we can point to when there are disputes. We can say, does this bring us closer to that goal or further? I get why you may feel that that's better, but is this in the group's interest, or is this in the decentralized interest as per our poll? Fine, and then we can have conversations about things in those ways. And then we can also start to coordinate. We can say, okay, there's a music festival. Okay, there's a, I don't know, something bizarre. We know there's going to be news coverage. And we can work in our own teams. Maybe we put together drones or something. We all decide to like let them loose and put in this display in the back of like a NASCAR thing. And it's just bizarre. And I think too, like a lot of like the art of the pamp, as it were, which to be real is a big part of what we're doing, has to be with some form of tact or requires some form of coordination in that way. I don't think buy Bitcoin and like big neon lights is what you want, but having some dog whistle, some weirdness, some like way that people would see it and be like, I've seen that before, or there's Dale Kraywitz, I don't know if he's here, he's like really put this idea in my head. Yeah, to get the suspicion going, that's where the need is. And again, this is a good example of how leadership I think helps. It's a big part of leadership is knowing who to follow. And you sold me on this idea to a significant degree because it's obviously, I think, what people respond to. But I think that's where we're going to grow next. I think that if we do this right, if we get lucky, a couple things could happen. We may see a period of social unrest in the United States at some point here. I mean, unemployment's very low, and the economy's doing amazing, but that will change. I don't know if it'll be a depression, I don't know if it'll be a recession, but there will be idle hands. We may see the growth of unionization. We may see a significant backlash, and if we time it right, we will have enough of our small groups, we'll have enough of our committees to where we have tentacles into these movements, like the Yellow Vests, or maybe Venezuela, or who knows what is next, to where we can make little presence known. And if we are able to unite all of these little tribes looking for virtue in some capacity with a shared currency, with a shared money, that's how I think we get from underpants gnomes to hyper-Bitcoinization. And that requires sacrifice, and it requires knowing people, IRL, doing things together, and in the interest of time, I think that's where I'll leave it. So hopefully I made the case. Thanks.